All right, what is going on, everyone? And welcome back to the Mets Weekly Podcast. We are live at this very moment on YouTube and on X to discuss the latest news and rumors all off season long in Mets land. But before we do that, of course, I want to remind everyone to subscribe to the Mets Weekly YouTube channel for weekly episodes of our show that are now recorded live every Monday night, typically at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. For those of you watching or listening on playback, you want to join the conversation in the future, make sure to turn on post notifications to know when we go live, as well as multiple videos we like to post throughout the week, all off season long. For those of you in the live chat right now, we love reading your comments, your questions, your concerns. And if you feel like you're being ignored, you aren't. You're just being starred throughout the show. We'll try to pull up as many as we can to keep the flow of the conversation going. Some may be saved for fewer questions at the end of the show. Follow Mets Weekly on X and on TikTok for future content over there. And for our audio listeners, make sure to follow us on all your favorite listening platforms to not miss the audio version of new episodes that go up at 9 a.m. the following day of recorded. So without further ado, let's start off episode number 113 of the show. Now, we are about, a week or two or a little bit over a week away from pitchers and catchers reporting to Port St. Lucie. We're getting closer and closer to spring training. Still some questions that need to be answered before games even do begin. Even the games that don't even count, still things that need to be answered. And we all know the saga that will continue and continue. Doesn't seem like it has any far end at this point because it seems to drag on. But my two right and left-hand men are here. Andrew, Frank. Frank, I'll start with you first. Just another week where we're talking about a certain someone who remains unsigned and other things happen as well, and everyone goes nuts.
Yeah, it's the month of February now, so we are now the month of spring training, pitchers and catchers reporting in about a week or so, a little more than that. We saw Ryan Marusio doing some work on the field now, so there's already some guys there getting their work in, so they're almost ready to get started, but there still are some things that they are trying to address. It's pretty late in the offseason for some things we're going to get to, but they still have not quite accomplished everything that we hoped for. We said we want P. Alonso replacement. We would like to move Marte's contract. And it's things that they are working on and maybe keeping Pete in general. So they are working on a lot of different things right now. I feel like February is not the greatest month to still have multiple things that you're working on. Like I said, I would like to go into spring training kind of knowing the plan and knowing what I'm working with. But the way they approach it, they wait for their prices. So, they play the long game, and this is what they're going with.
Yeah, I think that there really isn't a sense of urgency in the front office when they don't need it. We have had drama throughout this entire offseason, and we all know that maybe it can be tiring, but I think that when you have from the bottom of what you're trying to create here, and you're only in year 2 of a regime with an actual legitimate front office guy, I think that, the patience makes sense. It gets frustrating if you're a fan of the team. But I think we all know the circumstances that, they do need to keep this well thought out, and they do need to continue to, make these right decisions to get this sustainable thing going because, they have not gotten that yet. So it's a little bit of, lack of urgency and a little bit more specific of being a little bit more careful, not just because of past presence, but I think that it's just more of, they need to continue, to be a smart organization, and smart organizations do not overpay for first baseman going into their 30s. And if fans want to do it just to get it over with, it's just not how business works. Andrew, speaking of business and I don't even know where I'm going with that. What's up? How you doing?
Yeah, again, another chaotic week in every other sport except baseball. Again, we still got a couple of guys out there. We're still waiting for this Tubby Walrus to come back. But again, we have in other sports, franchise-changing moves are happening, and hockey and baseball. Mid-Carter is going to main event WrestleMania. I mean, it's been a chaotic week, and Pete Alonso still hasn't signed. And guess what? And he ain't going to sign anytime soon. The Blue Jays are still talking to him. God knows what's going to happen there. But again, like you said, patience is not something that Mets fans have. But again, you have a GM now that has a couple brain cells, unlike the last couple. So again, if you want to wait and get on a discount, hey, I'm all about discounts. I love getting good things for cheaper prices. So guess what, ladies and gentlemen? Just think about this. When you're trying to buy that car or a sandwich or a shirt, you wait it. You want to get a good deal on it. You don't want to overpay. If it's just a mediocre sandwich, you want to pay a mediocre price. You don't want to pay overpay for just something mediocre.
I mean, I wouldn't say that he's mediocre or anything, but come on. Tubby Walrus, yeah. Listen, I have no control over what he says. Just don't take it 100% seriously. Okay, that's all I ask.
Sorry, chunky polar bear. I got to be politically correct now. A chunky polar
stop
bear.
digging the hole. Anyways, Duran coming in here. Darren Rivera as well in the chat. Madeline saying Pete now. I mean, we can't really control that. I don't know what to tell you. But Jay-Z saying Luka Doncic got traded before Pete Alonso signed. Yeah, that's crazy. Somebody I did not expect to get traded in the NBA world. I still cannot make sense of that trade, but you know what? That's not what we're here to talk about, but it definitely shocked the sports world. And it was towards the tail end of my 23rd birthday. So, and I also thank everyone for the birthday wishes on Twitter, by the way. But yeah, it was a hectic week, let's just say, in sports news, as well as some stuff in baseball news that we will get into. Boober Esiason advertised that Pete would be signed this past weekend. Yeah. He usually doesn't take shots like that. And just says random stuff like that. So, I don't know if he knows something or not. He's broken a few things before, but this just ended up not being a thing. But you know, I think that everybody is trying to find some kind of resolution. Everybody is waiting for this to end. I think we already know, you know, what team Pete Alonso is probably going to end up signing with. It all just really matters of the time of when. When is it going to actually happen? But, you know, we'll see what happens. Again, still tons of things to look forward to. But yes, overpaying for mid. Is he talking about McNeil? Frank, is he talking about McNeil? I don't know. Is he?
He could be. I mean, I think he was talking about somebody else, but there's a lot of guys you can throw into that category.
Yeah, I mean, there's some that we can say are overpaid, and that type of mindset of we have Steve Cohen's money, we might as well just spend it on Pete Alonso and overpay for it. There's just, you know, there's a thought of the fact that, you know, that type of mindset gets you into being the Angels and not the Dodgers. We've talked about this many, many times before. And, you know, considering the situation and the matter, I'm in full support of the Mets taking their time with this, because there's absolutely no reason, especially when you have nobody bidding against you. And we'll get into Pete Alonso deep into that in a second and some of the reports that we got. But before then, I actually want to begin and start everything off with a big announcement. Some of you may know already, if you follow the channel, follow us on Twitter, but the Mets Weekly Podcast officially has a 24/7 voicemail hotline for comments, questions, etc. That could be featured at the end of our show that we do every single week. All you have to do is dial 845-208-5677 and leave us a message, preferred under 2 to 3 minutes long. Please refrain from using offensive and derogatory language and keep it Mets related. All calls will be pre-screened for obvious reasons, of course. Numbers will be blocked if you violate these rules. It is a one-strike policy. Mets fans, we want to hear what you have to say. Give us your brutal, honest opinions, just like we do every week on our show. So send us a voicemail at 208-5677. And if you want to be featured at the end of our show, that is 845-208-5677. All right, so we will get into those later on in the show in case anybody wants to call in. We'll also get into some viewer questions as we usually do. But as for what has been going on in Mets land, let's talk about the never-ending saga that we have talked about week in and week out. That I think everybody has just continued to be drained of it and just wants it to end. But again, we are a Mets news show. We are a Mets podcast. We got to do our due diligence. I don't know what to tell you. And give you some of the quotes and some of the reports that we have heard recently. Now, last week we saw early on that publicly our owner Steve Cohen, something that we have not seen many times before in sports, be very, very public, very upfront, very transparent in the situation, talking about his displeasure for the negotiations in regarding Pete Alonso. Now, when it came to his negotiations, he was, to give the cliff notes, talking about how pretty much it's up to Pete, defending what David Stearns was saying. Definitely a very hostile, very passionate crowd of Mets fans at FanFest last Sunday, and for very good reason, of course. And when it came to Pete Alonso, there were some pieces of context where Steve Cohen said that Soto was a very tough negotiation, and Pete, along with Scott Boras, without mentioning his name, this is even worse. So it does say a lot of what the message that they have been sending to Pete Alonso and Scott Boras. And ever since then, we did get a report from John Heyman, one of the main sources of Boras clients, saying no more than 48 hours after publicly lamenting the seamless, endless saga, Cohen was back in conversation with Alonso's camp. The Mets are still in play for Pete Alonso, but money remains the obstacle, and a resolution for him isn't imminent at this time. Pete desperately wants to return to the Mets, while the Mets have no problem going in another direction if they can't close the gap in negotiations. We had some other stuff from Pat Ragazzo, who has been on fire this offseason with a lot of different reports coming out for the Mets and linking them to a lot of players. He said that the Mets are back in talks with Pete Alonso, and there is a belief that some progress has been made towards a reunion. The chances of Alonso returning to Queens appear to have risen since Saturday's public show and tell from Mets owner Steve Cohen about how exhausting the negotiations have been, pretty much reiterating what was heard from John Heyman 48 hours after that public display. As for other teams that are involved in it, we've heard the Blue Jays, we've heard the Angels. Bob Nightingale said that the Blue Jays have really been Alonso's only other serious suitor, and if Alonso really wanted to sign there or anywhere else on a short-term deal, it likely would have to have happened already. It seems almost inevitable that Alonso will return to the Mets. Like we said, we pretty much know that Alonso is most likely coming back to the Mets. We just don't know when. Pretty much every single report that we are seeing come out and unfold in regards to Alonso's market, we have said many, many times before, continuing to repeat ourselves. And speaking of repeating ourselves and continuing to go and just rambling on, Andrew, I will give the mic to you. He desperately wants to come back to the Mets. That's very, very interesting to me. I know I'm just kind of egging on a sleeping giant here, but very interesting. And let me tell you, in terms of the market, once again, I did not see this coming whatsoever.
Yeah, again, it's all the same show and tell, and of course, he doesn't want to go to Toronto. Shocker! Nobody wants to go to Toronto. Surprise on Max. They got Max Scherzer yesterday, so you gotta love it. They're trying to compete, but again, it's to the point. The market is small. GMs are smarter. Nobody's gonna pay a one-tool athlete anymore. You're not gonna get term unless you are a 5-tool athlete, or unless you're 26-year-old and one of the greatest hitters in this sport, who can be, who has at least gives you a couple tools in the batter's box. So to the point of, again, we're exhausting every week, saying the same things. And again, we all know this is going to get down and probably going to happen. You know what? Probably on Valentine's Day, because Pete Alonso loves the Mets and loves Mets fans. Why not do it on Valentine's Day? There you go. Bring it back. And we still have 2 more weeks to talk about this guy for just being, and then he can come back and break all the records. So at this point, again, there's no market. It continues to be no market. You see the Astros are probably going to get Bregman back, so maybe how desperate the Blue Jays get, maybe that deadline with Vlad is coming up. If that doesn't hit, if they don't get him extended, hey, maybe they'll be a little more aggressive. But even the reports is they're not even getting to what the Mets offered at the $70 million. They're less than that. So again, Pete, what are you going to do? You are just pissing off Mets fans that you thought Francisco Lindor getting booed his first year back, that first slump after the stunt you've pulled this offseason, and we know how emotionally stable he is, just like his buddy Jeff McNeil. Get ready, Pete, because unless you come out the damn gates hitting 40 homers and go back to that 50 homer guy, that first little scutterbutt, you get ready for it. So at this point, it's a waiting game. He won't fire Boris. We saw the reports that other agencies have contacted Pete, and he's staying with Boris. You know what? Again, you reap what you sow. You turn down 158, you've turned down 70, maybe you've turned down 90. What more do you want in life? But guess what? You want to keep playing? I'll see you in mid-July after you play 2 months in Syracuse to get your spring training ready when you sign in in March at this point.
Yeah, I mean, there are other pivots out there. They're not the level of Pete Alonso, but we talked about this last week where the Mets already replaced that production of Pete Alonso. All they need to do is fill in first base. So Pete Alonso is kind of just seen as, at current moments, again, not finished product. I get it. There's the Dodgers. There's other competition. He's seen as, okay, if you want to come back, you can come back, but we're not going to do this forever. Frank, I mean, what else can we do besides repeating ourselves, as Truman Quinn says in the chat here, and a few other different puns as well in terms of the Mets and Pete Alonso? I don't think there really is anything that we can do but just wait this thing out, because there really isn't anybody that's really willing to push us to that way. So it's really, again, I think what we've said, again, it's up to Pete, or it's up to Boris, or it's up to whatever. But, I'm just tired of talking about it. I'm just ready for a resolution, whether he's back with the Mets or not.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing I'll add, what I'm curious about, we don't quite know yet, is has the Mets offer gotten better as the offseason has progressed? Like, have they put certain offers on the table? Boris and Alonso say no, and they say, okay, well, now we offer you this, and then they say no. Or have they been very just caught on a certain offer that the Mets will not budge from? Because maybe that's why Boris and Peter are kind of doing the waiting game, saying, all right, well, you know what? We're waiting for that better offer. We're waiting for that better offer. Or, like, it's kind of those things we talk about, like, who's going to blink first? It's like, are the Mets going to increase their offer for them to say yes? Or is Boris and Alonso going to lower their asking price to say yes? So when you get this deep into the negotiations, and if Pete really wants to be here and the Mets are the true suitor, somebody has to kind of give in a little bit here in order to reach that agreement. Because, I mean, clearly what the Mets value him at and what Boris values him at are not the same thing, and that's why they've not been able to come to this agreement. So at some point, someone is going to have to take the step to then make something different happen.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see who advances towards what or whatever. It seems like it's continued to be the staring contest, but it really just continues to look like it's the Mets just in such an advantage and no one's willing to give in. I'm seeing some people in the chat saying that Toronto offered Pete 6 years. I think they offered Bregman 6 years.
6 years, yeah.
And that was the report that did come out. It seems like Bregman's re-engaged with the Astros in that way. So there's a different, a little bit of a parallel going on right now with two Boris clients in Alonso and Bregman. But, I think that even if it was Toronto or he preferred to come back to the Mets, if the Blue Jays gave him a 6-year deal, he'd be gone by now. And like I definitely can guarantee that, because no other team is willing to do that. one thing that I do question a little bit in this is the fact that we're seeing Pete Alonso reject as many offers as he can with like pretty much the most diminished market a player possibly can. And the only market that you have is the wealthiest owner in baseball that has, you've been a homegrown talent here. And if you weren't a homegrown talent here, they probably would not be doing this due diligence. Like we have said, he is not, he's declined these last 2 seasons. So the Mets really, to be honest, they should have moved on by now. But it's obviously something that fans do still want, and they still want them to consider him. And until Pete Alonso isn't a Met, and he signs somewhere else, fans are going to want to bring him back. Whether, Brett Beatty does something in spring training or Mark Vientos does something or whatever, I think that, when it comes back down to it, this just was not a smart decision. We've had a lot of people, talk about, pointing the finger at Boris. We've had people pointing the finger at Pete Alonso, people pointing the finger at Stearns, people pointing the finger at Cohen. I mean, it's all really just come into what Pete Alonso wants. And the main reason as to why I continue to say that, when it comes to Pete Alonso kind of having like this little bit of a staring contest with us, I mean, yes, hiring Scott Boras is something that he probably should not have done. Looking back, as revisionist history, of course, maybe he thought he was going to have a bigger year than he did. He didn't. But one thing that we do, I feel like, ignore, Christine saying, of course, he wants to come back. No one wants him. Pete made his own bed. Pete's ego turned down $158 million. He couldn't live on $1 million a year for 58 years. He shot himself in the foot. And we've talked about this many, 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 many times as to where, he rejected that offer, that 7 years, $158 million. He rejected that before he hired Scott Boras. So it's not like Pete is, just getting bad advice here. Whether I'm seeing some stuff about how, Brandon Nimmo's the one to blame because he got, he recommended Boris to Pete Alonso or something. Pete Alonso chose to fire his old agent and hire Scott Boras. Because, again, the difference between Pete Alonso and Brandon Nimmo, you can't really blame Nimmo for Pete Alonso performing like shit. You can't do that. Again, that's like revisionist history that you're just continuing to try to look back on as to where, compared to Brandon Nimmo and Pete Alonso, Brandon Nimmo showed up in his walk year. Pete Alonso didn't. So that's a different story, right, Andrew? Because Brandon Nimmo, whether he had a rough season last year, he's him. He is him in those moments.
The greatest homegrown Met of all time is going to go down as the greatest Met of all time. Well, who knows? But again, and also everyone's like, well, just because they paid Brandon Nimmo means, Pete Alonso has to make more than Brandon Nimmo. Brandon Nimmo actually had a market. No, this is the idiots. There's a thing called Brandon Nimmo had a market because teams actually wanted Brandon Nimmo in his walk year. He had Toronto, he had Cleveland, he had other teams involved. Pete Alonso has nobody. I'm not going to make that joke. He's all by himself. He's on an island by himself. Nobody wants to give that man a life jacket. The Mets are here. They have their offer. They're not going higher. They're not going any lower because, again, you're not going to bid against yourself. So if you want to sit on that island, strand and go hungry, good luck.
Yeah. Now, Frank, there was one thing from last week that I think that we did miss, or maybe we didn't. We did see that there was like some kind of offer that, I don't know. Did we talk about this? I don't know. There was some offer that Toronto like had when there was reports about a deal being close with him in Toronto, that Pete Alonso was the one who basically nixed the offer. And there was somebody on a podcast. I don't know if this is true or not. It was just something that was floating around. It was like, over the last week where it seemed like they had a deal and Scott Boras agreed to those terms that they met for Pete Alonso, and Pete Alonso just kind of basically shoved it away. So again, it all signs really come to it as to where Pete Alonso wants to come back. Again, he's just not going to get his own terms. We've talked about this so many times. It's where, it's either you want the money, you want this, you want that. You can't have both. Again, like he's in a situation where he didn't play well in 2024. So it's like you can't have both. And that really continues to just put us in a staring contest, and also gave us reports that maybe the Mets are just willing to move on, because it seems like they are willing to move on, looking at some of the trade options. Maybe they keep Vientos at first. I mean, it seems like Pete Alonso is just more in a more desperate state as compared to the Mets right now, because, again, I think that, the Mets are sitting still here and they're just waiting for Pete to get a better offer. And that was, I guess, what they assumed when they had this whole pivot thing from Andy Martino. But that offer hasn't come.
I think what's going on here is that in the Mets, outside of Juan Soto, do not tend to overpay, so they're asking for more money. But Toronto, as we know, has no problem overpaying. I mean, they've been throwing money at just about everyone that's available this offseason. Most players have turned it down, but lately they've gotten some to take it and sign. So I feel like I'm sure that they've asked for a certain amount of money, and Toronto is much more willing to offer that. And Boras says, okay, that's what we're looking for. Pete, we got it. And he says, no, let's still see if the Mets could somehow be close. I mean, if that report is true, I wonder if it'd be one of those other times where we've seen other players take less money to go to certain teams. I mean, we've seen Trey Turner did it, and we've seen some other guys do it. I wonder if the Mets could just get close in the range. Maybe they'll say yes and turn down. Like, I don't think the Mets really have to overpay here to get Pete to stay, because I don't think he's really looking for most money. I think he just wants more money, but still be with the Mets. If it's just me from the outside looking in based off everything we've seen.
Yeah, I mean, he's just lost that merit to have that. And, I think that it gets really blindedly looked at from, the free agent market. A lot of, Mets fans, they see it as the guy who's been here for 6 years, the guy who could possibly break the franchise home run record, the guy who hit 53 home runs in his rookie year and had a historic year, 40 home run bat. To the rest of the league, it's looked at as a guy who's declined over the last 2 years. It's looked at as a guy who is a first baseman who doesn't play the best defense. He's not as bad as said, but he's still not great. Not a great base runner. He's a single tool heavy first baseman. That's how he's viewed as on the market. The Mets are only going to value him more than any of the other 29 other teams. The problem is he does not have that GM that was here to give him the 7 years, $158 million. He has a guy who, right now, who is looking at it in terms of player value, because Pete Alonso is not in that top 1% of, Aaron Judge, Juan Soto, Shohei Ohtani, Mookie Betts. Like, he's not in that department. So the fact that, we continue to have this discussion of, well, they're willing to pay Juan Soto, who wasn't even here, and they're not willing to pay Pete Alonso, what gives? Again, it's like right now, he's what is the competition in order to go that far for it? I understand wanting to get this thing done, but there really has not been anybody else that has challenged them. The Mets even said publicly, reported it. I don't know if it came from just Andy Martino's mouth and he just ran with it, if it was true or not. They publicly said, we are willing to move on now. They spent some of the money that went into the luxury tax bill. They said, we're willing to move on. We have talked about Mountcastle. We have talked about Torkelson. We saw a rumor about Anthony Rizzo today, which I don't think is going to be that materialized. We saw even a non-guaranteed contract be offered to Mark Canha, who can play first base. Like, there's been other options that have been explored by the Mets, and he still has not been given an offer. The Mets even tried. They even said, we're going to back away here. We're out. We're done. He still hasn't gotten an offer that, I don't know, he can't refuse or outbids or whatever. And to what Frank just said, it's like, it seems like he wants to come back to the Mets, but he also wants, money that other teams are not willing to shell out. The Mets can't really shell out, more money just because he's a homegrown guy, just because they have a fill-in at first base. Because the Mets are right now, in a situation where, they don't have to, overpay just because Steve Cohen has the money. It's also something to come to, as we've talked about it before. I think it was last week. If they were to overpay and give him $30 million a year, that would end up being like $48 million in luxury tax threshold. You're going to give $48 million to, or spend $48 million of the luxury tax and, go to all of that trouble to give it to a first baseman who, as an overall player, maybe he's the fringe top 50 or something. Yes, he's a hitter. He's a big hitter. He's been a big hitter for 6 years now in this organization, but there has to be a cutoff here. And again, if Mets fans, like we've said, if he doesn't like it, he should have played better in 2024. Anthony Santander is the exact same age as Pete Alonso. He got a 5-year deal. Why? Because he showed up in his walk year. Different position. I know maybe he can play, maybe he can play first base or whatever. Comparable at least. No one's going to give that term to a first baseman. I'm not trying to say that he's aging, but there has been a decline in production. I think we all can say that. Going into the comments here, Philip saying he's like a 2.5 win player. I do not think that they are very much worse going into the season without him. And listen, this is the thing. I think overall, when you look at the lineup as a whole, maybe it is a little bit top heavy as of right now. And you don't want Brett Beatty in the lineup. I don't want Brett Beatty in the lineup. But the thing is that the Mets have gotten into these situations where they're overpaying for guys for what they could possibly offer going forward. The Mets have to kind of look at this from the angle of, okay, well, what is he going to do going forward for us? How are we going to pay for this upside? What is what he has earned, or what is what? Again, there's a look of it as to where, can the Mets actually find a way of common ground here, which most likely will look like an overpay. But Brian coming in here, I don't know if I said that right, saying Brett Beatty sucks. We all know it. That's not a good backup plan. Of course, I think we've all talked about it, of how the Mets do need to add in another bat to this lineup, whether it is Pete Alonso or whether it is somebody else. But I think that this weighed out with it. I also think that, somebody said in the chat, I don't know who it was, but they said, Pete is already on thin ice right now with the team. And again, like Andrew just said a few minutes ago, saying, if Pete Alonso, were to struggle like he did in 2025, if he comes back after everything that has been pulled in this offseason, the stunts that have been pulled, after all of this, he wants to come back, but it seems like he doesn't want to sign a contract, and it's just a staring contest. And it seems like he was holding up a lot of this offseason, depending on the time that you're talking about it, depending on the timeline before they signed Winker, Minter, or even brought back Stanek, which we'll get into Stanek in a second. I really don't know how many times that we can say that it's really just up to Pete Alonso. Like, what does he want to do at this point? Because the Mets are willing to move on. They've said that they're willing to move on. And at some point, you're going to have to do something. I don't know if that's going to end up being a trade. I don't know if that's just going to have Brett Beatty in the lineup and they address it at the deadline. Compared to some of the stuff we're going to talk about in a second or later on, that might be a little bit deep of a deadline checklist if you're talking about a big bat that can play first or third base and you're talking about the pitching staff. But, we'll see what happens. Madeline's saying that this podcast is absolutely exceptional. That is something I do agree with. And if for those of you who do agree, leave a like on the stream if you have not already. Speaking of streams, it doesn't seem like we are broadcasting right now on the Mets Weekly Twitter account. It is on my Twitter account right now. I'll have to figure that out, and we'll be sure to get that fixed later on for the next show. But for some reason, it's just not going through, and we'll make sure to figure that out there. One point that we did have from our good friend Ibby from Till Mets Do Us Part, saying that this is going to last into spring training in hopes that a team suffers an injury, ups and downs, and it ups the price tag. Boris is stubborn, and he is going to go that route. It's very, very possible that that does happen because we've seen it happen before as to how these guys kind of hold out the way that they do. And I feel like eventually these tricks and these types of things, even though there's a track record beyond Scott Boras, front offices are just getting smarter in this regard. And there's some that aren't desperate, some that are. And then the ones that are desperate doesn't seem like a real attractive place. And it seems like Toronto, the only competition right now, seems like their priority is probably locking down Vladimir Guerrero Jr., like we've said. Because like right now, when it comes to Pete Alonso, unless he matches his 2019 season, the Mets will probably end up moving on after a year anyway. So it's not like, it's not like he is 100% in this future plans because he's been here for 6 years. I think that, there's some Mets fans out there that, are just ready to let him walk. They're ready to let him do that. He's still an option out there, and that's the reason as to why we are still talking about it. If his market hasn't been so poor, we probably would be moving on by now. But again, it's just continues to be one of those things. How Mets fans can have any sympathy for Pete is beyond me. It's just insanity. And that's the thing. It's not even just something of like telling fans how to fan or telling fans how to do this or telling fans how to do that or criticizing fans. It's the fact that, how I view it, and I know Andrew kind of views it like this. It's like, I don't know Pete personally. He doesn't know me personally. So it's not like, it's not like I need to be, fully emotionally attached to this whole situation. Because again, Pete Alonso, no matter what, if he does play next year, and he most likely will because he's not hurt like Conforto was, if he ends up playing or if he ends up going in 2025, he's going to get his money. He's going to get the top 1% money that ball players get that every typical person dreams of. Again, and that's the main reason as to why business shouldn't be personal. I understand the personal attachment to it. He's a homegrown guy. People look up to him and whatever. But you just never know. You just never know. Now, as for other things in the lineup, we had Christine say, didn't Iglesias bat over 300? Why aren't we signing him as a utility player? We did sign Nick Madrigal to a split deal, 1 year, $1.5 million. It seems like there is still an opening for Iglesias to come back. He's also a Boris client. For those of you who did not know, he actually signed with Boris in the offseason, which, to be honest, to capitalize on what he's been marketing this last year since coming back into the big leagues, go ahead and get that bag, King. I mean, come on. But I would love to have Iglesias back. I think he would be a great presence. Again, I understand if they don't bring him back because, again, catching lightning in a bottle, you just let it go. I understand that. And listen, I'm not happy with Nick Madrigal either. Man, isn't everybody excited about that signing? No. In fact, Nick Madrigal is probably one of my least favorite players in all of baseball. And maybe there's a reason why they brought him in as to why, maybe to mentor, his heir apparent who's in our farm system. Andrew, I mean, I don't know. Is it possible? But again, it's a split deal, so I don't know if he's going to fully be on the roster. We've seen the Mets, sign split deals before. We've DFA'd them, traded them for cash. Who knows? We saw the Mets very, very close to, the reports of that they want to bring in a veteran infielder. I don't know if that is Nick Madrigal. But it seems like the Mets haven't really been close in talks with Jose Iglesias. ACJ, before I swing it over to Andrew here, saying it's time to move on from Iglesias and the oh my God gimmick. Iglesias is a full-time pop star and a part-time pro. Listen, I understand if you understand, if you see it as that. And again, like, I feel like the way of how, magical or how sparks, flew with him coming here. I mean, even with me, I'm wearing the oh my God shirt right now. But, I think it was a big thing in 2024. I understand bringing in Juan Soto, wanting to win now. The vision has changed and you kind of want to, move on from that silliness. And it was good at the right time. The next time for it is probably just to reminisce back on it of 2024. So I get it. I understand it. When it comes to Iglesias, I think that there's a lot of ways that he can help fill in the margins for a lot of the young players. But yes, the gimmicks are something that we're going to have to move on from. And maybe there's something else that, Mets fans get attached to. But, we'll see. I'm not saying that Jose Iglesias should be the full-time starter. I think that it should be, interchangeable with what you do at second base, because that's how I view the position. Billy Epler didn't view that position in that way, as that's the reason as to why we have a second baseman still here and not on the free agent market. But, we all know who is probably going to be the second baseman starting regarding anything crazy. So right now, it does not seem like Iglesias fits into that model, especially with Stearns emphasizing that he wants to give, playing time to the young players. Boris is also representing Grimace. I heard he probably is. With the stock of Grimace of how that went up. Then. Yeah. I mean, literally, I think that there's definitely a market there. I mean, he was at the Baseball Writers Association dinner, I think, like last week. I mean, he's a big part of it. I think it all just went by in a blank. Roster is full for Iglesias. I mean, it's currently at 40 right now, right? But there's some guys on there.
They had to DFA Covey for Stanek we talked about, so it's pretty full.
Yeah.
But there are guys that are replaceable. I mean, there's not like, our 40's full, no one else we get. Like there are certain guys you definitely could exchange.
Like that.
He's on thin ice. I mean, even I agree with that. I mean, the Mets, like, if they keep Acuna, like, he's an option. And if Madrigal, I like, listen, as bad as McNeil was, even last year, he's still better than Madrigal. Like, Madrigal is not taking his job. Acuna is the one that would give him actual competition. If healthy and does what he's supposed to, maybe Jet could.
It's basically just like two cheeks of the same ass at this current moment. I feel like McNeil will bounce back. Well, he's going to have to keep his job at this current moment. But we'll see what happens. As for some other guys in the lineup, why do we talk so little about Ronnie Mauricio? I'd like him to get a chance instead of falling back on Beatty with a nice vomit emoji, which I definitely agree. The only thing that's going on with Ronnie Mauricio right now is we don't know what his health status is. We don't know if he's going to be willing to do that. They're basically taking it slow. He had ACL surgery after hurting himself and sustaining the injury in the Dominican Winter League last year. And it's been a slow process for him. So that's probably the main reason as to why it is so slow down in that way. I would love for Ronnie Mauricio to be a big contributor. Maybe he gets some reps in spring. I don't know. Most likely he's going to start off in AAA, which kind of sucks. But they're going to have to ramp him up in that way. Rosie saying, I don't think Mauricio will be ready. Possibly. But we'll see. Baby Huey, is he talking about Jeff? I don't know. I don't know if it's Jeff or Pete. I don't know. Timothy, you might want to, but I like that nickname, Baby Huey. I don't know who you're talking about. He's saying he's got to go. He is so jealous over Soto being the talk of the town. He is purposely causing problems. Oh, I think he's talking about Pete. When everyone should be excited about the upcoming season, Alonso is okay. So there you go. That he's talking about Pete in that way. Listen, I think that the Mets have been willing to move on. With him still being available. Okay, so he does mean Pete. Okay, so you never know what happens. But if they keep continuing to come back to us, it's not like they're going to completely hang up the phone, right? They won't hang up the phone because he's a homegrown guy, right, Andrew? He's homegrown. He's I'm just telling you, it's just, yeah.
Again, you got to keep every homegrown player instead of getting upgraded. It's not like the Dodgers' literal 3 best players were guys they drafted and developed. Oh wait, they signed Shohei Ohtani, signed Freddie Freeman, traded for Mookie Betts, signed Teoscar Hernandez. It's almost like that homegrown bullshit means nothing. Their only homegrown player were their secondary, Will Smith, in that thing. So the fact that we have people being like, "Oh, I'd rather have Pete Alonso than Vladimir Guerrero Jr." Y'all are a bunch of idiots.
I mean, if you're talking about this simply from comparison, Vlad's better than Pete. We know that he is. So if he is available, the Mets are going to go for it. I understand not wanting to take it for granted of somebody who can play in New York. He's your homegrown guy, but again, what else can you do? He's continuing to reject all of these offers. We're still sitting right now, February 3rd, 2025, about a week or week and a half away from pitchers and catchers reporting, still no deal done. So if there are other offers out there, then it must be some, magical offer that has been made up in his head or, he invented on MLB The Show. I don't know. But at this point, I don't really know what to say. It's all really, the ball is in the Mets court. And Pete Alonso is, out there fighting for himself right now. Richard Zucker saying Iglesias was the right place at the right time. Absolutely. Jay-Z say, I feel like acquiring. No, wait, there was another one. Wrong one. I'll get to that one later. I'll star that one later because that is a later on topic. Fath saying, I feel bad for Iglesias. His music career is nothing without Mets fans in the MLB. Listen, I think in 2024, Iglesias had the time of his life. I think that he'll always be, thankful for Mets fans and all of that. Obviously, with the Mets being the platform that they are, it being as broadcasted as it was. But, it really was a breath of fresh air, especially when he came up. With the Mets being as down in the dumps as they were, how great that he did play. And he was one of the guys that lifted us and elevated us to that postseason run. There's other things that need to be, put in within the mix. I'm not going to be completely upset that we let go of a role player that fills in the margins because there's definitely other guys that they can replace that with. They have young players as well. We'll see if they pan out in that way. We saw, Baby Acuna out there do pretty well in a little bit of a small sample size, so he'll definitely get a chance as well. But, we'll see how they configure this roster. There still is a little bit, I would call him the Pillsbury Doughboy, but that is safe for Daniel Vogelbach. Listen, that's a whole different story. But Christine's saying you folks love homegrown Pete. Each time he strikes out with men on base and lowers his bat, with a puss on his face like a big leaguer. Don't DM. Exactly. That's the thing. It will continue to be an up and down thing as to where one day they love you, one day they hate you. You know, that's always the look of the New York Eye.
I mean, that was his year. The whole regular season, everyone wanted him gone. He hits the Brewers home run, and everyone said, bring him back. I mean, and I was kind of like that too, but still, I mean, that's just the way it goes, especially in New York. It's a what have you done for me lately business.
Hey, don't forget the home run of Jack Flaherty. Don't forget that 3-run home when our season was on the line. We lose that game where they're celebrating on our field. Oh, my God, Purple Cleats.
That's the thing. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, I look at it as, you know, whether it is, you know, glass half full or glass half empty. It's like we keep going back and forth here. And it's like that one home run. Yes, it was big, but it does not define what he's going to do for the rest of his career. And, you know, and they were big hits. You know, we always talk about the results of how much that matters in the postseason, but we've also seen guys have good postseason runs, get paid, and dip out. You know, like that's the thing. It has to be very particular. This is not a third baseman. This is not a center fielder. This is not on the level of player. Guys get paid for the type of player they are, not the type of hitter. And even though the type of hitter that Pete has been, it has declined. And whether, you know, you don't want to hear that because you're a big Pete fan, it is the truth. If you're looking at it from numbers, from full-on emotion, if you want to give him $500 million, you can do that in MLB The Show. You know, I think that's possible. You know, there's mods you can put in there. Maybe MLB The Show will call you stupid in that way, to be honest. Who knows? But again, there's nothing really that you can do. It's all really up to Pete. Because if he wants to be a Met so badly, and he only wants to come back to the Mets, at some point he's going to have to agree to a deal because the Mets are going to have to just move on at one point. You just never know. Anyways, I'm sick of Pete choking in critical situations. This was all year in 2024, and we finally saw him break through in that at the right time. You know, we'll see what happens. But you never know. But as for guys who are here now and guys who have come back and reunions that we have had this offseason, we've brought back a few guys from this 2024 team, and we added yet another that we did acquire at the trade deadline and was a huge part to the Mets postseason run. And that being Ryne Stanek. Ryne Stanek is back with the Mets on a 1-year, $4.5 million contract to deepen the Mets bullpen even more. We all know that Ryne Stanek, even though there is a few flaws, maybe he loses the strike zone a little bit, he can be a little wild. He is a stuff demon. Throws hard, ridiculous breaking stuff, gets lots of swings and misses, big high leverage arm. Adding him back, the gas tank is reloaded. Now, if you were to look at the Mets overall bullpen depth chart, it's definitely deep in options, lots of flexibility right now. And we all knew that the Mets had a little bit of a struggle with the bullpen of who they actually could trust in some of these situations. We had quite a few blowups in that regard. We had, guys get hurt, such as Brooks Raley, Danel Nunez, who is on that list. We know that Edwin Diaz had some inconsistencies. You know, Ryne Stanek, when he got here, it wasn't, that superb, but then he started to kick it into gear down the final stretch of the season. AJ Minter, a big add to this bullpen. Reed Garrett, we know, was definitely overworked a lot in 2024 and had some injuries because of it. So that definitely lowers his role. Jose Budo, who also could be a starting option, is there. Maybe some control issues, wasn't amazing in the postseason. But was very, very solid in his body of work in the regular season. Griffin Canning was added right now in the opening day bullpen. Sean Reed Foley, always injured, very talented arm, but always injured. Huascar Brazoban is another one who's on the 40-man roster, who is some bullpen depth, who has a lot of upside as an arm, has control through 2029 wasn't great. Tyler Zuber was another arm that the Mets acquired at the trade deadline from Tampa Bay, and he did not pitch an inning for them ever since, but he may be somebody that is looked at as a factor. Max Kranick was on the Mets postseason roster for a little bit. I think he pitched like once in a mop-up duty or something. He also could be a possible starter. He's been before. Not something that you can really take to heart because he's had a lot of injury history, so most likely he's not going to be a starting option. We know Tyler McGill that is there. He can make a start. Wouldn't recommend it. Justin Hagenman was somebody that they brought in on a split contract. Kevin Herget on the Mets roster, who was claimed on waivers in the offseason. Austin Warren is another one as well. You look at this bullpen right now, I'm definitely seeing a lot more arms that I can trust. Frank, I mean, can you agree? I think that this bullpen's definitely gotten a lot deeper, and hopefully fully healthy, we can have a little bit more reliable sources from it to kind of piece together some of the innings from the back end.
Yeah, and I always say that, another name to always consider when you're talking about the Mets bullpen is Clay Holmes. Whether that's in the regular season or the playoffs, he's definitely someone who could be in this mix at some point as another, even not necessarily the high leverage guy, but someone who could get some saves and could be used later on in games and has experience closing. Like, to have that as another option is very important because you don't know how Nunez is going to be back from his injury, and then you're hoping that one of these other guys like a Hagenman or a Warren or one of these other guys, a Zuber, could step up. And you really want Brazoban to be who you traded for. I mean, because he was a big-time disappointment. The Baseball Savant page looked good. The eye test did not look good. So, I mean, there are some certain things that definitely could be improved. And, for Stanek, you want the playoff version, not the regular season version. Same goes for Garrett. Budo's the opposite. So there's a few guys you feel good about, though. Diaz and Minter for sure. And you feel better overall just going into the season. Whereas last year we knew that there was Diekman, there was Ottavino, and some other guys we really were just unsure of altogether. So you definitely feel much better this season from the beginning.
Now, one thing that has been talked about on this show amongst you, Frank, and as well as you, Andrew, I'll go to you here. Talking about a lot of guys who have closing experience, kind of backing up with Edwin Diaz, of course, with him making as much money as he is, you're not really going to, get that much of a pursuit of some of the frontline guys who are going to get closer money on the market, such as, Tanner Scott, whether it's also, Blake Tridon, somebody like that, Carlos Estevez, who just signed last week. But I think that overall, I know the depth is like a few question marks, some guys that go in and out. But as for the back end, if you were to say, with this bullpen, I think this is one of the best in the game, I would say. One of the best units on paper. Who knows the consistency, but I'd say that this has become, this offseason, a pretty decent strength, I'd say, for this team, especially from the back end compared to what they had last year.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely improvement. One of the best in baseball. I think that might be a stretch, but definitely a more comfortable.
One of, not the best.
Again, there'll probably be a few teams. But again, besides the point, again, in the upper echelon, you want to say the top third of the team of baseball? Yeah, definitely. But it's too, you feel more confident because, yes, Reed Garrett had that breakout last year. And you see Danel Nunez, two guys that none of us knew who the hell they were, majority of us, last offseason. Name took the strides. You know that David Stearns is going to find guys. And hell, there could be more minor league free agents or minor league deals in spring training invites that potentially could be done and still be done before spring training. So I think you definitely feel a lot more confident because you have a better back end. You bring Stanek back to lower Garrett and Nunez again. Again, you're banking on relievers to have some consistency. Again, not the position. Consistency is the great, most dependable. But again, like you said, it's a definitely an improvement for what it is. You move Brazoban down, Zuber down in the depth chart to say Sean Reed Foley coming back, who, has had his moments of being great. He just can't stay on the field. Like, the bullpen overall can be a strength. Again, we'll see if there's any other more, minor league deals that can be made. But I mean, it's definitely I think it's more trust dependable than the rotation. You could say on paper, I think more fans would say they'd be a little more confident in the bullpen than they are in a rotation. But again, it's still a strength, and it's good to see, that David Stearns just knows what he's doing in the bullpen, and you can trust those guys. And you also know the 13 guys in the bullpen on the pitching staff on opening day is not going to be the same 13 on July 31st. So there's going to be adjustments and tweaks made, but at least going into the regular season, you feel that back end is great. And then we'll see. Hopefully, you get this year's Reed Garrett and Danel Nunez, and maybe it's guys on that list, maybe it's guys that are currently in AAA that we have no idea who they add, can continue to deepen this pen. But it's definitely can be seen as a strength.
Yeah, I mean, I can swing it back to you, Frank. I think that, when it came to Ryne Stanek overall with this signing, and obviously I talked a little bit more about this with our good buddy Evan from Mets Central podcast when this signing actually did happen. Hopefully we do get a little bit more of the consistency that we were hoping to get from Ryne Stanek. He was struggling a little bit, had a lot of back issues, and it seemed like the Mets were able to get a little bit more of that whole thing's configured a little bit, whether you're talking about it from their pitching lab or whatever. I think that when it comes to, a guy like Stanek who could have some closer stuff, possibly. We've seen Danel Nunez be in these big, like these high leverage situations before. Relievers can be so finicky because then there could be possibly somebody on that list that I just showed in the back end who does not pitch well and ends up getting DFA'd. Like we don't know if there's a part of this, but would you say that this is definitely more of a strength to this team as compared to, maybe some other things that you see in departments on the team? I think that it got deeper from the back end, and for most importantly, in my opinion, gave you a little bit more of a pillow for Edwin Diaz to get a little bit more rest as well, depending on you have, the injury recovery as a factor or him just trying to get right. I know he likes to pitch a lot, but again, when it comes to, the overall usage of the bullpen, it was taxed last year. So to get as many quality bodies here, I think that is a really good thing, and hopefully it becomes a strength of this team. We know about the whole thing with the rotation, but some guys that can give you length, some guys that can lock things down, some guys with closing experience. I think that they've done a really good job here in regards to the bullpen so far for this pitching staff to complement it down the stretch.
Yeah, I think the big thing for me is that, like you said, you just have more guys who are reliable in general. But what I want to see is, do you have enough guys who, if you could bring in anybody with a 5-run lead in the 9th inning, and a high leverage guy does not have to get warmed up in the bullpen, because that's where the overusage comes from. And guys come into games where they really shouldn't have to. Like, even if Nunez has to come in to get an out, it's like the fact that he even had to warm up is just not a good indictment of your other pitchers. And like we said, if you can't trust them in all scenarios, then why are they in your bullpen to begin with? I mean, I think for the Mets, if I'm not mistaken, at least in the Brewer series, it felt like maybe about half of the Mets bullpen was not used. I mean, that's pretty concerning if at least half of your bullpen you feel like you cannot use. I mean, because we talk about, Braziban was not used, Ottavino wasn't used, Danny Young wasn't used. I mean, like, there was a bunch of guys that they were just avoided at all costs. And you're like, okay, we could only use Garrett and only use Stanek and Diaz and Budo to some extent. But for somebody like Garrett in his first postseason, I mean, that's pretty unrealistic. Just be like, oh, here's like this new workload and we're counting on you to kind of bail us out here in the middle of the game. Like, that's not the way that he's supposed to be used. I mean, I've looked at his numbers, and I mentioned it like during the regular season, but he's someone in particular who is so much better the more rest he gets. If you work a Reed Garrett back-to-back games, he really loses that effectiveness, and we saw the injuries he had this season. So if they're just able to use their guys in a much different way and keep them more fresh, it's not going to make them better, but they're going to have less injuries in general if they're not overworking certain guys.
Yeah, that's the sole point of, the committee of, the rotation, as to where, yes, it does not have the best names, but, that extra day of rest, guys can be sharper and guys could be healthier. And that's, a way that it's a way to kind of just, piece things together, and then you can kind of, address what you need to address at the trade deadline. We'll talk about some trades as well. But one more thing from Ricardo saying any chance of a Brooks Raley signing. Brooks Raley underwent Tommy John surgery early in the season last year. Most likely will be back in the middle of the season if he is healthy. I would love to bring him back and maybe wait for him a little bit and maybe replace somebody on the 40-man roster. But, we'll see. I think that there is a need for another lefty or another, bullpen arm. We'll see if that is like Tim Hill, who they've been attached to. We'll see if they go for that. They're still in the market for that. Because I don't want to see Danny Young just because he's out of options or something that he's on this team. They do have some relievers that are out of options. Will probably get the first crack. You'd never know. But some spring performances may make them change their mind. And, you never know. We did not expect somebody like Zach Short to be on the opening day roster. We did not expect, some of these, what was his name? Yohan Ramirez, the guy that threw behind Hoskins or something.
Yep.
I think that
you never know when a banker might show up. I mean, you never know when a duck is going to show up. I mean, a pop singer. I mean, the strangest occupations to become professional baseball players. Like, it happens.
Yeah, you do know. I mean, you never know what profession is going to come your way, especially with the Mets. You never know. But I think that, it is... it's going, he signed with the Nationals, Jorge Lopez. And then also, I don't think that's going to happen. I think that he kind of burned the bridge there. I don't think that's going to happen. Did we get rid of Phil Maton? We did get rid of Phil Maton. His option was declined. He is unsigned. So you never know. He might come back and haunt us and haunt our dreams. But there are some guys that they have been attached to. They're still, being opportunistic in that way because, there's always a way to deepen the team. But, we've talked about it throughout a 162 game season, and this is going to be something that we will get into as well in regards to these other trade rumors for starting pitchers. You need arms. You need arms throughout the entire year. You can never have enough pitching. It is the most injured position known to man. Putting all your chips in one basket, you just never know. You take that risk with everyone, no matter what you're giving to them. So you might as well continue to be flexible and have that. Did Tim Hill sign? If not, what is he worth? He has not signed yet. It seems like the Yankees are interested in bringing him back. Speaking of pitchers, the Yankees actually did sign Carlos Carrasco earlier today. That was their revenge for us taking Soto. Very upset about that. Tim Hill did not sign. Seems like the Yankees are attached to him. Some other teams as well. The Mets have been attached to him. On this market, probably it's like $3 million, $4 million, something like that. I don't know, because again, he's kind of looked at as a middle relief type of guy. He's not going to be a back-end closer type, kind of somebody who can fill in some of the holes as well. You just never know. What's our payroll right now? It is on the left side of the screen. Right now, payroll plus tax is $326.13 million overall. They are in the cusp of the third luxury tax at this moment. And, we're getting very, very close to pitchers and catchers reporting. Now, speaking of pitchers, not catchers, pitchers, there were some rumors that came out about the trade market because right now the Padres are in a situation where they need to offload payroll. They are right now in a situation where the ownership has some disputes internally and they have some contracts tied in. AJ Preller played a lot of fantasy baseball these last few years and they're going to have to offload a little bit of it no matter what. We saw them offload Soto last year. Send him to the Yankees. So there is a little bit more of guys in their contract year who it seems like they want to offload. Two guys, particularly being starters, Michael King, who they got in the Juan Soto trade, and Dylan Cease, who they acquired last year, very, very close to the beginning of the season. and those both are rentals. There will be one more year left on the contract, and they will be free agents at the end of the season. Now, I do want to do a little bit of a rundown on these two arms, and I first want to start off with Michael King. Now, Michael King came off of quite the season last year, a breakout year, his first pretty much full year of being a starter, 173.2 innings pitched, a 2.95 earned run average. Definitely getting a lot of swings and misses, inducing great soft contact with a 97th percentile in hard hit percentage, 79th percentile in barrel rate. Some of the best exit velocity, overall contact that he has given up. Lots of chases, lots of whiffs. He's a sinker baller. 16 inches of run on his sinker. He does have a fastball that touches around 95 to 96. Overall, not the greatest stuff, but the breaking stuff is basically where he has done fairly well recently, a lot with the sweeper, of course, which is definitely graded high, a 124 stuff plus. If you're into, the Enosaurus stuff plus metric, he definitely knows how to get a lot of chases and get a lot of whiffs. He's got lots of swing and miss stuff. Overall, he's not as explosive, but he does have a lot of movement. And that means that he's definitely able to expand the zone fairly well, get outs, and also continue to go deep into games, which there was a little bit of a concern with him early on in his career when he was with the Yankees, got hurt a lot. And then you also have Dylan Cease as well, who we all know has had a little bit more of a track record of being one of the best upside starters in the league. 4 consecutive seasons of 165 plus innings pitched, 32 plus starts, 200 plus strikeouts, less than a 1.4 walks hits per innings, and a 3.5 plus wins above replacement. Big swing and miss guy, 92nd percentile in whiff rate last year. A fastball that can touch the high 90s. 18 inches of induced vertical break. VAA, of course, hovering around 4, which is something that you really want to see. One of the best sliders in all of the game. Lots of spin on it. He does get a lot of chases. The knuckle curve as well gives him a little bit more of a kitchen sink, but he does, again, have some of the best, breaking stuff in this game, or the best set of breaking stuff in this game. Did allow a little bit more hard contact than he probably wanted to, but he is somebody who attacks a lot of hitters. Came off of a 3.47 earned run average last year. Call strike and whiff percentage at 29%, which is near elite. Nearly a 5-win season. Another season where he almost got to the 190 inning threshold, 180 inning threshold, something that he has done for 40 consecutive seasons. These are two guys that are on the market right now that it seems like they are selling high on, the Padres, and the Mets have seemed to make calls for both of them. Now, it seems like it is highly unlikely that the Mets were to trade for one of King or Cease at the moment. It seems like a little bit more of a deadline conversation. But when you look at the Mets rotation, it is, again, a topic of discussion where you don't have the big firepower in there as compared to maybe some of these other rotations, such as the Dodgers or the Phillies, or maybe the Padres in general without King or Cease in there. There's other rotations that are pretty good in the National League as well. We know that even though they might not be the biggest playoff contenders, but the Pirates have some talent in that rotation as well. A lot of people have been talking about it, as the Mets possibly moving on from some of their prospects to move to acquire one of these guys. But we did ask you guys in the chat of which guys you would, which of these two you would prefer to trade to, and I will swing it over to you guys after I give you the results. We asked you guys, if you have not voted on the poll yet, please do. I asked which Padres starter with 1 year of control would you rather trade for. 34% of you are saying Dylan Cease. 34% of you are saying Michael King. 22% of you are saying doesn't matter, just land one of them. 9% of you are saying neither of them. You don't even want either of them, and you just want to roll into what they want. We have seen reports that the Mets are happy with the rotation at this current moment. That may not be something that people are happy with right now, specifically Andrew, because he just doesn't understand what baseball does. But again, there's a lot of things that are talked about. We saw Will Salmon saying that it's possibly not going to happen. But just for the topic of discussion and things that have gone on these last week of reports that we've gone out to, Frank, I know that you made a video about a possibility of somebody like Dylan Cease or maybe Michael King. I believe that you're on the side with me that you would prefer to go after Dylan Cease, correct?
Yes, I would. I think it just makes more sense. I feel like with King, he's the better pitcher, don't get me wrong, better ERA and things like that. But I think what this Mets team needs right now is stability and sustainability. I don't think the Mets need this guy that has this great stuff but doesn't have a long track record or maybe has the injury history. I think the Mets need some durability. With Senga's injury, I have injury concerns about Manaea. I feel like the Mets just need that stable guy. The Mets don't necessarily need an ace. You'd like ace, and Cease is one of the very few that could provide ace material, but also be that stable guy, your innings eater, which is what I think this rotation ultimately needs, because we don't really know what's going to happen with Frankie Montas. Did Pearson could be back to not being reliable. Like, a lot of things could happen with this rotation. It's one of the rotations where it could go good or it could go bad or a little bit of both with some of the pitchers in there. Like, there's not a lot of guarantees in there either way. Cease would actually provide a guarantee.
Yeah, I think that they've kind of, they're poking around at the trade market right now, but there is, some talk of maybe they do add, because there are some question marks here. You never know. Maybe they go a little bit more of the 6-man rotation. These two, of course, in a contract year, maybe they would probably want to pitch every 5 days. Some people are saying get both of them. I don't see that happening. If, the Mets were to offload, I don't know, their entire top 10, maybe that possibly could happen considering what the price is. The price probably will lower as you get to the trade deadline, which I think is what it's going to look like. But speaking of the prospects, the prospect guy being Andrew, it seems like when it comes to Dylan Cease, we got this report from Pat Ragazzo about a few hours ago saying that the Padres are asking teams for at least 3 top 25 prospects for the 29-year-old Cease. King is expected to draw a lesser package, which I personally believe, because, again, I think that Cease is a better option. I understand the ERA was lower for King, but I think that Cease has a lot more to offer given upside. It's a better fit here. This whole situation here, I know, Andrew, you need an ace because good player makes good baseball team. But what are your looks of this trade market? Do you think that there's something that does get they swing something later, or is this more of a deadline discussion? But also, Cease or King is also something that you can answer as well.
I'm in the group that I don't care. I'll take either one. I think this needs to happen. I'm going to retort this deadline notion, because if the Padres are good, they're not trading them. Like, that's the kind of problem you run into. If let's say the Padres, you get to the deadline, are the number 2 wildcard team, they're not trading them. So this is this needs to be done by opening day type discussion, or they'll just lose them for they'll just let them walk. Unless, again, we know the ownership problems or financials we've seen, but the fact that, one, they're setting that price at 3 of your 25, meaning they're okay with them going into the season, but you have to blow us away. If you blow us away, then we'll trade. So it's to the point of, I don't think if they're good, they're not trading them. So it's to the point. I don't think the deadline thing. Yes, could the Padres implode, and then that's a different discussion. But the Padres still look relatively decent on paper.
We've seen them underperform before. Is basically
yes, and that's the other thing. That is very true. They have done it, but yeah, they still have a decent team on paper. Even losing a few guys, they still look decent. And especially, they can beat up on some teams in the NL Central, even though they could be a punching bag in the NL West. But and they still have a decent, obviously, really good rotation. They keep the two guys. You still got Nando. You still got Cronenworth. You still got Machado. So on paper, they are. So there is a risk. Is if you're not going to pay the prospect capital now, so the Padres are good. That's not an option at the deadline. The other thing, which has been the new trend, is let's just push it. And I love that Andrew Friedman said it because he realizes the last couple deadlines. The deadline, you're no longer going to get rentals for nothing. Have we not realized the last 2 years? Get your shit done now so you don't have to overpay then. Because we've seen freaking Trevor Rogers for Connor Norby and Kyle Stowers. This is what the market has been. Jason Adam in the reliever market. That has become ridiculous.
The Kikuchi deal. There was a lot there, and he doesn't even stay with that team.
Yes. And that's what I'm so sick. And I know you said it, but the way Andrew Friedman said it when they signed Tanner Scott, which was so fucking true. The notion of, we can get him cheaper at the deadline. Probably not. The way the last couple market, and if this market continues to go, that it's always going to be a seller's market now. It's 3. Let's say we're setting the market now at 3 for 25 now. Let's say at the deadline, it could be 4. It could be 5. Who the hell knows? Because if you're desperate enough, and let's say the Mets are really good, and let's say Kodai Senga has another slip-up. Possible. We'll just thought it's a possible. You need another front-end guy. Now you're desperate at the deadline. I know we talked about 3, and now I have, let's say, the Yankees. They've had a decent rotation. Max Fried's hurt again. Then you're getting into the bidding war at the deadline where the markets have continued to inflate. Then you're running to that risk. So, in my opinion, if you want the guy, get him now. And the other thing, whichever one you prefer, if it's Cease, if it's King, I'm okay either one. I think Dylan Cease has had some problems with blow-ups, and in New York, I don't know if that's going to be great. Yes, the stuff both guys have are great. So, again, I'm perfectly fine with either one. I would take either one in a heartbeat. If King's cheaper, I maybe would prefer to go the cheaper route. But, hey, if Dylan Cease is, let's say it's 2 prospects, 3, I'll rather just give the extra 3rd prospect to get Cease. If you're telling me it's just 1 top 10 and then Jose Budo for King, or let's say it's Gilbert, Tidwell, and throw another guy in there, Acuna for Cease. I think I would do King, but again, it's just to the point of, do you prefer it? For me, it doesn't matter. But again, I think we need to stop with this narrative of, we'll just wait to the deadline, because we've seen the new trend now is trade deadline markets aren't what they were 5 years ago, where, you can get cheap rentals for nothing, unless you're the Dodgers, where you get Jack Flaherty for nothing. But everybody else has a price of ungodly moments. So if you, and the fact that Freeman said, if you want them, get them now. Stop waiting. So that's how I think. If you want it,
here's
done now.
Here's the thing. He's Andrew Freeman, and he's the GM of the Dodgers, and he basically has the leeway to do pretty much anything. And he has basically the resources to shell out whatever the hell he wants, because the Dodgers basically just play fantasy baseball. So it's really easy for somebody like Freeman to say that. But again, I don't think it's really the look of, when it comes to the pitching market, I don't think it really has anything to do with overpay or what it's going to cost. I don't think it's really anything about like the traditional market or how it has flowed, because yes, there's been overpays for these starting pitches that, Kikuchi and Rogers, the way that they just went on that market. I mean, that was an insane return that you probably didn't see, years before. But when it comes to this market, I think it's more of just the look of how the Mets are seeing it is, where are we at the deadline? Because right now the Mets, they do have some chips. They do have a surplus of guys, but they also have a farm that is very volatile and very marginal and not as attractive as compared to other farm systems. So I feel like emptying the tank probably would be more emptying the tank for the trade deadline, because is this team willing to go all in? Because we've seen the Mets, again, Who knows what they are by the trade deadline? We're hoping that they're a competitive team by the trade deadline. But again, it's more of just the look of how putting all these chips into one basket and trading away for this frontline guy who is a rental. It's more of an all-in move to me. And I feel like are things during the season that we've seen David Stearns already address as a member of the New York Mets in season. Like we've said, with the entire bullpen, there was only Diaz and Ottavino on it from the opening day roster. So there are going to be continuing to be tweaks in that way. I think they want to open the gate a little bit more for Brandon Sproat, for the young guy in that way. I don't think that they're relying on him because they have, depth and they have arms that could fill in those innings if he's not able to do it at the major league level. They have a little bit of a fallback there. I feel like if it is known as we need a guy here, let's go get him. Maybe we overpay, maybe we don't. But again, there's other guys out there. Somebody mentioned Zach Gallen in the chat. Maybe he's somebody that they do make a move for. Pitching is going to be expensive no matter what. So it's not like we're going to get a full-on bargain because, again, we traded away. I mean, what did we trade away for Paul Blackburn? It was like some nothing prospect that, we knew wasn't going to make the majors. We know that it's going to cost a lot. I feel like if they are in that position with Juan Soto here in the prime of it, we already talked about it, winning the World Series, all this whole go in, all in. I think it's more of a deadline discussion of what the Mets are at and not just the market. Like, I feel like they know they're going to have to give up one of Gilbert, Clifford, and who else? Jet Williams, or they're going to have to give up one of them or two of them or three of them. Who knows? But I feel like that is going to be something that they are going to willing to push the chips on because they're probably going to know what they want, considering that they have the openings for the young guys and they'll see where their value is at. Does that make sense? I don't know, Andrew. Like, is that because again, I get what you mean about like the price being up now with them running out of time or whatever. Yes, Andrew Freeman does make a point there, but also you have the Padres. Let's say if they're if this is a big if. Big Justin Herbert if, right? Big if. Let's say they're, falling off and they're underperforming. They're going to be very, very desperate to offload them. So maybe there is a little bit of a discount there. I think it's all about the situation at hand. When it comes to the Padres, they want to cut salary. They're the ones pushing to cut salary. So I feel like from both ends, there's a little bit of give and take. And they're probably going to be looking for a little bit more because of how pitching is expensive. And they have every right to because, what Trevor Rogers got at the deadline and Yusei Kikuchi got at the deadline for both of them to walk the next year. Definitely a sunk cost in that way. But you just never know where they're going to be at the trade deadline. And I just don't think that the Mets have that surplus to just say, okay, just start trading these pieces off right now, especially when we don't know where we're going to be at because we have not been a perennial contender yet. Like, I feel like it's easier for the Dodgers to say that compared to what the Mets are right now, where they're trying to repeat or go further than what they did in 2024, which they have not been able to do in back-to-back years or 3 years in a row, pretty much throughout like their entire franchise history, and it's belittled them the entire time. Does that make sense? I don't know. But I get what you're saying. It's just like I feel like it's more of a team thing than league thing of the view that the Mets are looking at it, considering of where they are compared to Andrew Freeman's Dodgers. Does that make sense, Andrew? I don't know.
I mean, yes and no, but I saw a report, and this was I'm trying to find, I can't find it on Twitter. I don't know if it was Nightingale or Murray or one of them said that San Diego, obviously the Cubs were talking as well
yes,
with their pitchers, and the report was that they prefer the Mets prospects over the Cubs. The
Mm-hmm.
fact that they asked for Matt Shaw from the Cubs and they want somebody better than the Mets prospects is interesting. But if true, again, I don't know, it could just be Bob or one of those guys talking at their ass. If to the point of Preller already likes your guy, just get it done. Like, that's how I look at it. Again, I understand, yes, they should wait to the deadline. Again, we Padres, whatever. But if Stearns values the guy, and either if it's Cease, if it's King, if Preller's already said, hey, I want this guy, if it's Luis Angel Acuna, let's say that's the piece. I'd rather give up the pieces now to get the guy, say, okay, what do I have left to work at the deadline for other things? That's just how I look at it. Again, do I expect to get done? No. But if the fact that Preller is prioritizing your prospects over the Cubs, which the Cubs overall have a better system, then maybe you're playing into an advantage where at this point, if he's interested, and again, you have that surplus of blocked prospects, yes, you have that conglomerate of middle infielders, you're going to have to move these guys eventually. So, I understand, yes, we should probably be a little bit wait and see, but to the point of, yes, you said with Soto, like, you do have to move, kind of not do something stupid, but there needs to be a little more acceleration instead of playing this, well, let's play it conservative, and maybe we had we could see add another Blackburn type starter. If you can get it done now, get it done. And like Frank always says, I want to see him in New York, and not just for 2 months. I want a full year of seeing, and if I can get him, get it. None of this, well, let's be conservative, put Clay Holmes back in the bullpen where he's good, and not have to play the excuse route. And injuries are going to happen. So wait, Clay Holmes wants to get back in the rotation? What's it called? Frankie Montas tweaks his oblique. Clay Holmes back in the rotation.
Yes.
That's my thing. Like, at this point, injuries happen, and I understand Sproat will get opportunities. I'm tired of, we have to wait. Injuries always present, especially with pitchers, present themselves. So I don't want to be, I can't make the move because I want to get Sproat. Sproat will get opportunity because somebody's going to either tweak an ankle.
I get it.
Especially somebody else.
I get that.
So if you have the ability, get it done.
I get it, but again, it's so easy for Andrew Freeman to say.
Well, I'm not even
considering
saying Freeman,
what he's had in front
I'm not
of him,
even saying I'm saying from the start. If Stearns wants the guy, and if you're going to still talk to him, give a shit about what the deadline with Freeman said. Even though, again, we should be in the same press, we have the same stuff financially.
That's just like a multi-billionaire going up there and saying, "Okay, this is how you make money. This is how you do this glorious thing." How?
Well, I mean, they've also already captured a World Series in the past few years and just got another one. So they're also operating under a different expectation, whereas the Mets are still in this drought. So for the Mets, I mean, you want to see more of a sense of urgency because you don't have one yet. And you're the one, and the Dodgers, they didn't need Tanner Scott. They didn't need any of the moves that they've done this offseason. They're just doing it because they can. So for me, I mean, I think that the Mets could just really use another guy. I mean, whether they have to wait till the deadline or whatever, that doesn't really matter to me because I'd be surprised if all these guys hit to a level that you feel comfortable playoff wise with 4 of these starting pitchers. I just don't see that right now. I think that and my question is will Stearns ever move a top 10 prospect? And it's if so, who is that player? What would he be looking for? I would think it'd be a pitcher, a starting pitcher. I mean, because we said, starting pitchers cost a lot. So I would think that's when he would do it, but he's yet to do it. So, I mean, it's kind of one of those things where, I believe it when I see it.
I get why he doesn't want to do it, though. That's the thing, because he wants a little bit more of that sustainability. He wants a sustained winner. The Mets are going to have to build things from top to bottom, like we have said. I understand. Juan Soto's here. We're wasting everyone's prime. David Stearns is cheap. I get it. I understand it. But it's more of the look of, the Mets aren't at that level where they can do that yet. They're going to have to think this out, and it's not going to have to be a panic move that sets you in one of those situations where, we have to have an ace because we're looking at a playoff rotation. We don't have that ace right now. I think that you have that in Kodai Senga if he pitches every 6 days and he's going to be able to be healthy. We'll see what happens. It's a 162-game season, I feel like. It's just the way that with pitching and with this pitching market, I just really see pitchers as bodies at this point. Yes, there's different levels of talent, but that body can break down no matter what. You never know when it will. So it's not like you don't need quality. I get it. It's something that does help you, but you also need that quantity to bring you down the stretch of the 162-game season. I understand wanting to do it. And listen, I get when people say that this rotation worries them. Like Rosie's saying here, I wish that the Mets would make a move. but they won't do it. I think that they're willing, they're open to it, they're looking at it, but they're also looking at it kind of the same way with Pete Alonso. We're fine going elsewhere. We're fine with the alternative. We're fine with what is going there because 162 games need to be played. It's not like we can just, sim to the trade deadline like MLB The Show. You know what I mean? Kodai's too fragile to be an ace. Every pitcher is too fragile to be an ace. I think that there's only a select few of aces that stay healthy, like Dylan Cease. I mean, Dylan Cease is out there who has been healthy these last 4 seasons. Corbin Burns has been healthy. Yeah. Burns is another one. Blake Snell has had a lot of injuries. Blake Snell has had a lot of inconsistencies. Spencer Strider was out all year last year. He's considered one of the frontline guys. Even Garrett Cole, Mr. Iron Man. There's also another guy who we should have kept, and we wouldn't be talking about this if it was in Zach Wheeler. Beyonce's husband right here, Jay-Z, says it perfectly. But again, I think that there's a look of it from the overall committee of arms that, have upside and can continue. I think that there are Mets fans that are looking at it from names, and I get the concern, but there isn't much risk here, and the Mets are just not in a position where they can take that high risk with these pitchers and stretch it to 3 years, 4 years, this type of thing. I don't need to do this full-on sense of urgency, top-heavy type of thing to just because they're names and they were good and there was this and there was that. I'm not looking to do the Verlander Scherzer thing again. I'm not looking to do any of this frontline stuff because it's a frontline thing. In a 162 game season, you need arms. You don't need just, let's do star power. We need star power like the Dodgers, because if you think like the Dodgers right now, you're going to end up like the Angels. So that's how the mindset I look at it. I mean, it's not really...
Time out.
You're going to end up like the Angels.
Not if you got Boy Genius. Whoa, time out. So now David Stern's not going to be a good executive if he just brings in good players? If he brings in good players, and this is David Stearns, you trust him to bring in good players. God. So who cares?
He needs to build something, though. He needs to build something to trade.
He's got plenty of little people to trade. He's got plenty of little people to trade. They have 4 top 100 prospects. Get them out.
Okay, so since our farm system is better, apparently, to the Padres than the Cubs, we need to unload the entire thing.
If the report says 3, that's not the entire thing.
That's not it. That's 3's not 30.
And didn't say top 5. It said top 25. I mean, by that standards, I'll give you 25, 24, 23.
And listen,
I'll put sweetener of 22. How about that? I give you 4.
If I were one that was saying that they like our farm system, I probably would be a little bit more aggressive. But again, I understand why they want to hold this off with this certain position that gets banged up as much as it does. Like, I understand with this position of you want to keep things flexible. You want to do like these different things and address things internally before you go external at the trade deadline to go all in. I get it. When it comes to Dylan Cease, I 100% would trade for Dylan Cease right now. I would trade them anybody but Brandon Sproat. And the only way that I would trade them Brandon Sproat is if Dylan Cease signs a extension, which is probably not going to happen because he's a Boris client. And that's just not going to happen at all. And also paying pitching is a risk in itself.
Where does it say that Boris is a... Where does it say he's a Boris client? Because I see agent says Aces.
It does not say Boris Corporation.
Is that Michael King?
No, I'm looking at Cease.
Cease?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure both are not Boris clients.
What's that?
At least, I mean, listen,
Either
that's
way,
what my favorite website says.
Market.
So,
which website's saying that?
Baseball Reference, my favorite website. It's never wrong.
No, Spot Track Boris Corporation. Yeah, he's a Boris.
So they have 2 different things then. That must. I guess that's either his old agent or that's weird. That's very strange because normally it says Boris Corporation.
Yeah, Spot Track's got it as Boris.
Yeah, it's Boris. He's Boris.
Well, they need to update their website. That's not okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
What the hell? That is
Baseball
illegal.
Reference? Oh my god.
Yeah.
But
Unreal.
yeah, I mean, I think I understand why they want to do it, and I know it sounds exhausting, but again, like they got to build something from top to bottom. Like they still need to do that, and it's going to take a little bit more evaluation than just, okay, here's my chips. Let's take this guy for 1 year. You know, like I think, and then also the factor of being a Boris client is another thing that I think is something that goes into a point of where the Mets just don't, or I don't know if they're in good, presence right now with Scott Boras. But, if I were to choose between Cease or King, if I were to, I would choose Dylan Cease, like I said or hinted earlier, because of, what the Mets need. And I agree with Frank somebody who not only has, frontline stuff, which, again, if you're looking at it from the inside of, projecting it going forward, going into their 30s, overall durability on the arm, Cease has better stuff than Michael King. That's been known.
No,
he
Michael
may have
King has
regressed
better
a little
stuff.
bit. What?
Michael King has better stuff.
No, Cease has the better stuff. Michael King has the better secondary stuff. Cease has the more explosive stuff overall and better stuff overall. And Cease has a little bit, the command has regressed a little bit for Cease, which is probably the main reason as to why people are saying Michael King, and probably the main reason as to why this is an ERA battle as of right now. And Michael King is, he had a second year as a starter or first year as a starter. He was a breakout. Dylan Cease has been able to give you innings for 4 consecutive seasons. That's the type of stability that they need. They need the innings out of, the current fit. I think that Dylan Cease is the better fit here. I also think the hard contact that he does give up kind of gets a little bit mediated at Citi Field a little bit. Compared to that, personally, right now, if you're looking to make, the move right now, I think I would just go for Nick Pivetta, but that's a different story. But
And listen, they also I can't believe that he said no to a qualifying offer because I didn't think he was QO worthy in the first place, and that's why nobody wants him.
Well,
he was not worth the qualifying offer.
The problem is with Nick Pivetta is he's an ace that doesn't look like an ace, okay? You have to understand this, okay? I am a big Nick Pivetta guy, but, there's still rough things around the edges that are not great about him, and he seemed like a tease his entire career. Let's just say that. But I personally, with a committee of arms going into 162 games in front of you, I think that's, more of something that I would pursue. Because you don't really have to, you do kind of have to give up a draft pick for him. So again, there's still.
For now, listen,
Yeah.
is he a Dallas Keuchel where you wait till middle of the season and then you could get him, no draft pick? It's possible. But I haven't even seen much traction on his name lately. So
Not really.
He doesn't have a very hot market.
We saw Morosi say, great source of information, like a week ago, saying Mets and Red Sox were like the top suitors or something. Mets probably checked in. The Mets have probably checked in on pretty much every pitcher, everybody out there they've checked in on. But again, I think it's a deadline conversation as to where if the Mets are in that certain position, they're willing to give up those pieces. But with 162 games ahead of them, and just 1 year left on either of these guys' contract, and the lack of sustainability throughout the franchise, and the this and that, putting all your chips in this or whatever, keeping things flexible for the young guys. I think that there's so many different angles that you can go off of this that I'm like, okay, I understand not wanting to go after the high end pitching because of the position that it is and the position you are is in a franchise. And again, I feel like it's so much easier for somebody like Andrew Fryman to say that as compared to somebody like David Stearns, who inherited a team that's nowhere near that level. Like, I understand it, but again, I agree with you guys in that way of like, I would go pursue Dylan Cease right now because it seems like that would be a really good fit with the uncertainty going into the season. Going to the trade deadline, maybe Senga's back. Maybe Senga's healthy. Maybe Manaya's okay. Maybe Clay Holmes has a Seth Lugo type of campaign. I feel like it's all really has to be addressed at the deadline. Not really the price, but just more of the position that the Mets are in. You know, what would it take to try to trade an extension? God, I mean, it's
the
pitching.
Yankees really messed everything up with the Fried deal, in my opinion, because he got offered way too many years for his age that I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what he wants to go based off of.
No clue. I have no clue. And if I am Michael King right now, if I am Dylan Cease, I'm testing the market. I'm 100% testing
but
it.
didn't Burns take a discount for Arizona because you can't even compare it to the Burns contract? So it might be somewhere in between there. Yeah, I mean, you could be looking at like maybe 6 years, I'd say at least. It could.
Cease, you could compare a little bit to Burns because of, you know, the overall volume that he's able to give you compared to Burns. Burns obviously is a little bit more of a higher pedigree of a pitcher. Cease is a little bit more upside than downside.
It wouldn't be a sign and trade. It'd be like what the Mets did for Lindor. They traded for him and then signed him to an extension a couple months later.
At the buzzer.
I mean, it'd be more like that. Yeah, literally at the buzzer.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be a sign and trade though, because
something that you could probably model after. You know, with
Mookie
maybe
Betts,
more
the Dodgers
Michael
did
King. Dodgers did it with Glasnow. Glasnow was more of a Glasnow was more of a fact that, you know, it's a discount because he can never stay healthy. So, and it was more of,
and he got more years because of his age. So it's a different value as well.
And it was also, what was it? It was like the same amount of years, the same like total value by like $1 million off to what the Mets gave to Jacob deGrom. I'm pretty sure.
Interesting.
Something
so I mean,
there.
he's kind of his own. It's like pitching is tough. I mean, everyone's kind of in a different situation. You have to look at like.
So that's why I get it. That's why I get not
like,
wanting to go full force for it. That's why I get it, and that's why I understand why they built the rotation. They look at it as this is a position that breaks. It continues to break. We've seen it break in a Mets uniform, probably exceptionally even more compared to other teams. So I understand wanting to be a little bit more patient in that way, allow the young guys to come through the system, such as Brandon Sproat, maybe Tidwell grabs his footing, something like that. I'm not saying bank on them, but keep the options open because a 162 game season, it's not like, you know, you're looking at this from, okay, we're trying to win the World Series right now. Because you can't win the World Series in April or May. Maybe the Dodgers already won the World Series after what they're doing. Who knows? But they have that resources to do that. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like that is the kind of way to look at it. Darren Rivera saying studs and duds around the corner. Yep, everyone loves that segment. Everybody likes to give their opinion in that way. Now, speaking of everybody's opinion, I do want to get into some of your call-ins and give you guys such a taste of how this is going. Now, we do have a few people that did call in during our stream and how it started off. Now, there is a few things that I do want to go over for those of you who were not here earlier from when we announced this. A reminder that if you want to call into our show, our hotline is open 24/7 for any comments, questions, etc. regarding our New York Mets. Call us at 845-208-5677 and send us a voicemail under 2 to 3 minutes long. Please refrain from using offensive or derogatory language. All calls will be pre-screened for obvious reasons, and numbers will be blocked if you violate any of these rules. This is a one-strike policy. So send us a voicemail at any time. 845-208-5677. That is 845-208-5677 for a chance to be a part of our show. Now,
and call
I do
now for
want to
free
pop
shipping.
things up. Yeah, and call now for free shipping as well. There is one thing that I want to get into before we do start this one off. But this is one part of the conversation I do want to just piece together from this. He's saying Sturds won't even move Beatty, so I don't expect him to move any of the top 10 prospects. I get it, kind of. There has been talks about them possibly moving Beatty. We know that there's been rumors about it before. I feel like they're all just being opportunistic in this way. A decision's eventually going to be made. But after what we have kind of seen recently, I think that this is something that will be decided sooner rather than later. But I think that they do want to keep the options open. Eventually, it's going to narrow down to who is the guy that you are going to give the full-time job to, even though we know that Vientos is more in the equation than Brett Beatty, if Alonso does come back. But, you know, the moving of different prospects. Andrew, I will swing this one over to you here as I set up our call-in station here. So what are your thoughts on that? I mean, Beatty, we know that you've been attached to him. You've been wrong about him forever. He's made you look like an idiot. What are your thoughts on like the overall availability of this farm system to trade? Because it is going to be a centerpiece to this trade deadline if they were to go in and, you know, hunt for these big fish that could be available at the trade deadline. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's not 2022 anymore. Beatty is no longer a focal piece of it. I think he can be a side, again, major league 26-man roster guy. Somebody, again, it's like a Seattle Mariners want to take a shot and say, hey, they got, you know, they brought back Jorge Polanco. Hey, maybe you want to make a trade for that. We can try to get Brett Beatty as an extra guy on the roster. That could be a thing. Especially when what you got?
Yeah, I mean, like, the Mets had chance to move Beatty before, but now he's our opening day roster, so they actually can't. Yeah. They shouldn't move Beatty right now because they don't have an alternative. So they're in a pretty tough spot right now.
Hey, Paul Young's out there.
Listen, I talked about plenty of guys that are still out there that they could use that are better than Brett Beatty. So they do have options, but right now those options are just not employed by New York Mets.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's, you know, some availability in that way. I know that, you know, this is something that, you know, a lot of, you know, Mets fans kind of want to do right now, and they kind of want to push it in this way. You know, I think that the price is the price right now. And like I said, with the overall sustainability, building from top to bottom that the Mets don't have in the Dodgers way, you know, I think there is, you know, a way to look at some of these guys of how they value some of them. But again, acclimating some of these guys on the prospect list or talking about, you know, from the farm system, everyone's going to get acclimated at some point. They're all going to contribute to the major league roster at some point, no matter what. And I don't say that as to everybody is going to be playing for this team. It's that somehow, they're all going to be acclimated to this roster, whether they are playing in the major leagues for you or they're traded for other pieces. And that's kind of just the asset acclimation that we're looking at. I think that Beatty was pretty much a sunk asset before David Stearns even got here. And, you know, I feel like we'll see. It seems like them being linked to Pete and linked to other guys kind of shows that they're not really trusting in Brett Beatty. I would not trust Brett Beatty. But we'll see how they address that. And again, could that be something that they address at the trade deadline too? Maybe they do. I would just probably at this point prefer them to get something done with Alonso because they're kind of just cornered into it and see where they have to go there. I'm hoping that we are in a situation where Brett Beatty is starting off in AAA next year. To be honest, I don't really want to see him ever again because I've seen enough from 600 plate appearances in the major leagues. So I don't know why this just switched over. That was not what I wanted to do. But anyways, let's get into some of your call-ins. it looks like we have two here that are transcriptable here. So here is Maddie from the chat, as she says in the transcript. Let's see what Maddie's got for us here. Once again, you can call in at any time, 845-208-5677, 24/7 hotline. Let's see. Guys, let us know if you hear this or not. I'm still trying to set this thing up and configure it. So here is Maddie calling into our show.
Yes, hi, you guys have a great show. This is Maddie. I just hope that we get Pete, before opening day. I don't know how they're going to play around with Vientos at first. Is that really fair? Mark had a really great year. I know maybe defensively he wasn't paramount, but I thought he did a pretty good job at third, and he's awesome bat. And is it right to flip-flop him to first? And we definitely need a front-line starter. And I'd love to get both Jose back, Jose Quintana and Jose Iglesias. Okay, so hopefully that'll happen. Let's go Mets. And yes, we need Pete, we need Jose Iglesias, we need Quintana, or possibly David Robertson, or both Quintana and Robertson. All right, love you guys, and I would love a starter from the Padres, either Dylan Cease or Michael King. Thanks, guys. This is Maddie. Let's go Mets, and you guys are awesome. Love you. Have a good one, and let's see what we can get done. Thanks. Bye-bye.
All right. So there was definitely some other things of, some things that we can do this off season as well. I will, copy this in so you guys can remember and unpack all of that. But, I feel like we've all kind of reiterated most of this stuff from, I think there was a little bit about Jose Quintana in there of possibly bringing him back. I don't think that they are in that department. I think that that's pretty much long gone at this moment. But, there are some things as to, bringing back Pete and, how they kind of configure this roster. We talked about, the frontline starter there. But, anything that you guys want to unpack from that, thank you to Maddie for calling in to our show. Frank, I'll go to you on that one. What do you think about some of the thoughts here, reiterating as much as you can?
Yes, no, there was a lot of good thoughts, and it was very complimentary and supportive, so that is a perfect first call. That's exactly what we like to hear. But I feel like with Vientos, as far as he has, like she said, he has a great year, but then his reward is, okay, now you have to play a brand new position. Like that yes. Definitely is not ideal. It's not what you want to do to your young players, but that's just, unfortunately, by default, what they have to go with. And like she mentioned, he wasn't great at third, but he got the job done. He was serviceable. He wasn't a liability. It didn't prevent them from moving on, kind of thing. But he's probably better suited for first if he could just learn how to scoop the ball. Because that's really what Pete did really well. So if he could just scoop the ball, he'll be a perfectly fine first baseman. So I hope that shouldn't really affect his game too much as far as what that means for him offensively, because he does have a great bat. He had a phenomenal offensive season, both in the regular season and postseason. So, and we'll see if he ends up there. There still is that chance they bring back Pete, and then Vientos does go back to third. So it's still possible he could end up at either position, or if something really crazy happens, he's a DH. If multiple moves happen eventually. So he's someone that could be rotating different position each year. So it's possible, but we'll see once opening day does happen. As far as Quintana, he's someone we haven't really talked about, and I'm kind of surprised another team has not jumped on him, maybe on a 1-year deal or something like that, or like a 1+1 with some incentives and opt-outs and things like that. He's, like people mentioned in the chat earlier tonight, strong at the end of the regular season. It was good in September. He was pretty good in the postseason as well. So you would think somebody would reward that veteran pitcher. He's kind of a known guy. I feel like I understand why the Mets don't want to do that again, because we had our concerns about some of the inconsistencies that we've seen from him. But I'm not surprised.
Full counts all over the place.
No, high pitch count, not working deep into ball games. So I understand the Mets' concerns, but I thought another team would have jumped in on him by now. Some other guys I mentioned here, Iglesias, listen, I don't know what's going on there. I mean, that's a whole other deal. Me personally, I don't believe Madrigal means no Iglesias. It's a split contract, because this is what I don't get, is that if Madrigal is not good, which a lot of us think he might not be, and he does not make the Major League roster, you don't have a utility infielder. I mean, that is not something that is on this roster, unless you count Acuna. But I mean, we've all talked about he's probably better off in AAA than a utility guy. He needs to play full time as someone developing. He's not going to develop as a utility player. So I feel like Iglesias, I don't know what the deal is there. I haven't seen a market for him. I know the Mets are looking at it as like an outlier, and they don't really believe what he did was sustainable. They don't believe it's a 300 hitter going forward. I get that. But I still feel like I would hope there's at least some offer on the table. Even if it's not amazing, like, they should still offer him a deal. Even if it's very cheap. Like, there should be something there. Robertson, he's one I feel like another team could get maybe for closing opportunities. I just think he probably, and he's 40, like, he has better opportunities elsewhere. If his market really does not develop, you could jump at a 1-year deal, see what happens. But there still is time. And obviously, she mentioned the Padres starters. We're all in sync that we'd love to get one of them. So, all good points. We all agree. Some of them are more realistic than others, but we'll see. And again, I don't understand the whole Iglesias thing, why they're not pursuing that a little more. It's just kind of strange to me. I just don't understand why you would put more value in Madrigal than Iglesias. I mean, I feel like even if Iglesias regressed to what we expected going into the season, he's still better than Madrigal. So it's just very strange.
Yeah, it seems like he probably wants a guaranteed contract. If you hire Boris, you're like, I mean, that's what you're looking at. Andrew, I mean, I think I know why Jose Iglesias is not re-signed with the Mets yet. But we don't have time to get into that. We've already talked about the best way to get him back here, especially for probably what he's asking. But as for from what Maddie said from the overall recap here,
I guess I'll go with the Iglesias. I'll go with the Jose's first, and then because we've kind of talked about the other ones. I mean, again, Quintana, there was some interest from Toronto because, again, gotta love Toronto spending money, and I think that was before they signed Scherzer. So I think maybe the fact that they signed Scherzer maybe takes them out of that market. I mean, I would have said like a team like Detroit would have made some sense before they've signed Jack Flaherty. I know they have obviously School Bowl Flaherty. I still think they can use another just innings eater. I know they went up with the chaos pitching in the down the stretch of the playoff run, but that could be a guy in a big ballpark. He could kind of fit perfectly there. Again, Jose Iglesias. We have a $12.5 million Magic Squirrel that plays second base. That was a great contract that we gave out. A couple All Stars and batting championships. But again, I think Madrigal shouldn't, like Frank said, it shouldn't be the reason they don't sign him, but yet kind of feels like I think we've got to talk about with Mauricio that like he's going to be this year's Zach Short, where he's just going to be on the opening day roster. We're going to be like, why the hell is he here? Just because Mauricio will be down in Syracuse, getting his reps in which he needs. I would be completely shocked if Ronnie Mauricio, unless he literally Barry Bonds spring training, hits like 15 homers like Chris Bryant did that when he year before he got called up. I think the only way you see Ronnie Mauricio. So I think a Madrigal being brought in kind of eliminates Jose Iglesias. And I mean, I thought the team we all kind of thought would have been the team to sign him. They went out and got Donovan Solano and brought back Jorge Polanco. So, I mean, the Yankees need an infielder. I mean, if he doesn't want to change houses, the Yankees could use another infielder out there. So that's if he wants to stay in New York. Again, I think if there's no gerbil here, I think there's a better chance. But because of that gerbil, I think Mr. OMG might be going elsewhere.
Yeah, it's possible. I don't think he's I personally don't think he's coming back. I would love to have him back in the role that I think that he can do well, but there's someone blocking. There's someone there that I'm not really. He ain't going anywhere. So, and to be honest, he's probably going to sign a 10-year extension without Stearns even knowing. So, you just never know what the deal is. It has to be said that, first base isn't a brand new position for Vientos. Again, John saying, he's played there half a year in pro ball as a first baseman. He's been scooping balls for 8 years. He should pick up 5 runs moving to first base. And whilst saying that while Statcast, he's easily one of the worst third baseman in the MLB. The 13th lowest percentile by fielding runs and the 6th lowest by OAA. Listen, I think the arm that Mark Vientos has is what's keeping him over there. I think that he's still young enough as to where he can improve. Defense has a little bit more of a ceiling to, veteran-ish players. They can always get better. There's always adjustments they can make. But for third base being the defensive position that it is, it probably is better for Mark Vientos to be at first base for him. But as for, I think, overall for the team, I would much rather have him at third base because I know that definitely that playing time there kept it going. But, I think, whatever it is, we'll see what happens. But as for the rest of your call-ins, I think that we will just do one for today because we are kind of reaching over to what we want to do here. We will be sure to answer some of your call-ins in the future. Once again, if you guys want to call into the show, you don't have to call in during the show at all. You can call in at any time, 845-208-5677. That is 845-208-5677. 24/7. Our voice box is open. Give us your thoughts at any point, and they may be featured in the Mets Weekly podcast towards the end of the end of our show. So I think we're going to wrap things up here. As for some other things that I do want to point out quickly, obviously we talked about Canna and Madrigal being possibilities that get fill in here that the Mets signed. Another thing I want to point out here, which came before this show went live, Pat Hoiberg was canned for the gambling situation. I think that there was some kind of investigation that went on. I'm not sure the whole details on it. I haven't really read into it. But it is kind of a sad thing because, yes, actions have consequences, and you should be fired in that way if you break some kind of policy. But he is one of the best umpires out of any of them out there. Usually when you know an umpire's name, it's not a good thing, but Pat Hoiberg has been very, very accurate for a long, long time. And to be honest, this probably would be a blemish on a possible Hall of Fame umpire career that he has been building, because he actually has been one of the most accurate, one of the most liked, and it seems like he can be reinstated in 2026. But that is definitely something that will be looked at as something as to a umpire who might make the Hall of Fame. Because again, it's not just players that make the Hall of Fame. Umpires can make the Hall of Fame. Managers, tons of people can. I agree with Truro here. I wish it was Ramon DeJesus or maybe Victor Carapaz, whatever these other hater umpires we have that are anti-Mets during 2024 that suspended Diaz or tossed out Lopez or whatever. I think that, Hoiberg definitely did a good job as an umpire, but, behind the scenes, there was things that he just did not do that were up to policy. It's a shame because, we see guys who are big contributors, but they end up, doing something stupid, and it derails their entire reputation. And that's what happened with Pat Hoiberg. So, it's quite a shame. It is definitely a big loss, though, to this league about accuracy, because there is a lot of umpires that get under everybody's skin throughout the season, and we talk about bad umpires all the time, whether it's subjective or not. There's another guy right there that we can mention who kind of screwed things up even though he showed some shades as well. Other guys you can put out there as a Raiders fan, Antonio Brown. He screwed up a lot of things for himself. Another guy, Henry Ruggs, another Raider. Starting to see a pattern here. Andrew, I'll go to you to close this one out. If you want to, say any words for Pat Hoiberg, because I know you guys are really good friends.
Well, I mean, again, we're getting all these degenerates out here rigging ball games. You got another guy in the NBA, and what's it called, Terry Rozier. Everyone's this is what happens. You want to legalize sports gambling, brothers? We're gonna have a bunch of Pete Roses in the Hall of Fame pretty soon. Everyone's gonna be gambling all that money and all that dough over there. Besides the point, again, we're a week from pitchers and catchers reporting. Again, we're gonna have another week of chaos. God knows with other sports how many more blockbuster trades have to happen at midnight when I'm sitting on the toilet doom scrolling. It'd be nice to not have to happen at midnight and look like a fake trade. Hey, Mets, maybe you make a 12:30 blockbuster out of nowhere, and we can maybe do a 2 a.m. live stream again. That's a good idea. But again, just
no, it's not a good idea. But
Frank, we can wake you up.
on.
It's okay, Frank.
No,
we'll
I
wake you up.
don't want to wake
We'll
up.
get you a cup of coffee, and you get ready to go. So, besides the point, again, it's another week. We're getting closer to baseball. Today, for the first time, we got to see people actually playing in Port St. Lucie. We're this close, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, we saw Clay Holmes. A sighting from him. Obviously, he's got a bigger workload to work on for 2025. We saw Ronnie Mauricio out there in the field today. We saw a little bit of somebody else. I don't know who it was. Trying to think of it. No clue. Frank, I'll go to you. Want to wrap it up?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's exciting times. I mean, they're in Port St. Lucie. They're getting ready to go. So, like we said, we're just getting really close to when that first game starts. And like we said, there's still more things that have to be done, not just for the Mets, but there's, like I always say, still big targets available just all over baseball. So there's still some things that have to be finalized. But we're getting there slowly but surely. So, like you said, 1 week away. So we're like right there. We're at that final stretch before we could get baseball back up and running.
Yeah, it's always that fun, cusp of baseball season in that spring training is as we get closer and closer to opening day. It's one of my favorite times of the year because you also have, near that part, you got March Madness as well. I love March Madness, but you also have, spring training where you get to watch baseball, but it doesn't matter. It does not matter what the results of the game are. So you just get to relax. You get to evaluate things. You get to talk about things. Maybe we overreact a little bit to players that we don't like. But, you never know what is in store. And then, of course, somebody said in the chat earlier, I think it was Darren Rivera saying we get to evaluate some games and say who our studs and duds are. But, we'll see what we have in store. One day that I do dread is one of the first, team workouts where we get to hear the health status of everyone, and it freaks everyone out. So we're getting close to that. But spring training should be interesting. We'll see if we have any of the young guys who gets invited, who's the rosters, whatever. The minor league spring training camp as well. We'll have all of that news. We'll have it all covered here on Mets Weekly, whether it is live, whether it is by video, whether it is by our podcast. But as for this podcast and this episode, we're going to wrap up things here. Thank you guys so much for watching, listening. We hope you enjoyed the entire conversation. For those of you watching or listening on playback, you want to join the conversation live in the future, make sure to subscribe to the Mets Weekly YouTube channel. Turn on post notifications to know when we go live. Like we said, we just opened up our 24/7 voicemail. One more time, I'll give you the number, 208-5677. Call it at any time. Give us a voicemail. Give us your thoughts. You can call us drunk at 4 a.m. Doesn't even matter. Whatever you want to do. And they will be pre-screened as per usual for obvious reasons. Other than that, make sure to follow Mets Weekly on X and on TikTok, all of us individually. Links are in the description. And finally, as per usual, let's go Mets. And we will see you guys next time.